Changing tack now, and Hillary Clinton has given speeches in Melbourne and Sydney warning about China's growing influence in Australia and across the Asia-Pacific region.
Her concerns come as the New South Wales government announces a review of classes in Sydney schools that are funded by the Chinese Communist Party.
This is the March of the Volunteers, the Chinese national anthem. And here it is being sung by school children. In a Sydney school running what are called Confucius classrooms.
The partnership between two education departments is a first for Confucius Institutes around the world in promoting Chinese language and culture to school students.
But critics like academic and author Clive Hamilton claim it's a whitewashed version approved by the Chinese Communist Party.
For example, you won't read about the Tiananmen massacre. Tibetan people will be portrayed as happy and contented living under Communist Party rule.
Mandarin is the second most spoken language in Australia and the fastest growing language being taught in Australian schools. In a growing number of schools, it's taught with the help of the Confucius Institute and financial backing of the Chinese government.
These Confucius classrooms are an outpost of the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda department.
The Confucius Institute also offers free or heavily subsidised study tours to school principals. This week, New South Wales Education Minister Rob Stokes revealed that was being reviewed.
We are suspending the trips that principals have been undertaking just to allow us to do this review and make sure that the program, its objectives and its mission accords with community standards.
China watchers say it's a small example of the Chinese government's desire to grow its influence in the Asia-Pacific region, where it sees Australia as a key player. This week, on a speaking tour of Australia, former US Secretary of State and presidential candidate Hillary Rodham Clinton gave this warning.
It is insidious. It can eat away at the fabric of democracy. And so it's imperative, I don't care who's in government and who's not, but it's imperative for the Australian government to protect Australia's interests.
And we're joined this morning by Professor Clive Hamilton, author of The Silent Invasion, China's Influence in Australia, and Benjamin Sun, Managing Director of Think China, a company which helps Australians do business in China. Good morning to you both. Clive, if we could start with you, describing what looks like innocent Chinese language classes, the sort which many people around the country have taken as part of a communist plot. It just sounds a little bit over the top, a bit paranoid. Why are you so concerned?
Well, I mean, there's been widespread concern in the United States and Canada, as well as here, about Confucius Institutes and Confucius classrooms. And that's because there's no doubt that they're part of the Communist Party's kind of global outreach, if you like, under the guise of spreading language and culture, which of course is a good thing, and we need more of that in Australia, but not if it is funded by the propaganda department and in a way which essentially whitewashes Chinese, modern Chinese history. And we saw quite a chilling example there of school children being taught to sing militaristic, nationalistic Chinese songs. I mean, we don't want our children's curriculum determined in Beijing rather than Sydney. It just doesn't gel.
It is significant, isn't it, that the New South Wales government is reviewing these and has actually stopped them. Ben, if the classes were just a cultural exchange, why would there be this very serious review?
Yeah. I'm not sure, Professor, whether you have attended the Confucius Institute class. It's not as what described in the media. From my experience, it's basically a language class, and it's cheap to access. $340, so under $300 you can learn a language for 10 weeks just as interest.
All right, learning the military songs?
No, absolutely not. So I can find equally that in China, there are kids that are singing Australia songs as well. I'm not sure it's using that to point it out. The Confucius Institute is a fair acquisition.
I think that the song that they were talking about was one that was particularly used by the Communist Party, peddling military beliefs. Let's just get Clive's response to what Ben has had to say. Clive?
Well, I mean, I'm sure if anyone walked in off the street and stood in the Confucius classrooms, they'd think, oh, this is good, this is nice, kids learning the language, learning something about Chinese culture, which of course is a good thing, and there should be more of it in Australia. But it's really what the more subtle messages and what is not taught. I mean, one principal of a school which has a Confucius classroom was asked, why the kids don't learn about, for example, the events of 1989. And he said, well, there are so many other things for the children to learn about. And of course, that's the point, to consistently present a whitewashed, positive and optimistic view of modern China rather than a more comprehensive, systematic and indeed honest one. And so that's the concern. I had a contact from a parent in the northern suburbs of Sydney who rang me the other day to say that he'd turned up at his child's school where they had a cultural day, and for the Chinese segment they had a 15-minute video which was clearly very slickly produced as a propaganda video coming out of Beijing. And he rang me because he was very concerned. He said, why are my kids going to school to watch Communist Party propaganda? And I think it's a very fair question. So it's excellent that the New South Wales government should now be reviewing this. We want more language, Chinese language and culture in our schools. We want to be more China literate in our schools, but we don't want that to be in the form of a propagandistic
So let me
exercise.
ask Ben, you're here, you've heard the description, propaganda videos produced in Beijing. Are they? Is that what they are?
First off, back to the music, that sound.
Yes.
That's their national sound. Yes, it is to do with Second World War and China stand-up, etc. But it's their national also.
It's their anthem.
Right? Anthem. So that's fair. And national, propaganda video, if actually showing in the classroom, that's wrong. So I absolutely agree with it. But I'm not sure if that's happening or we need to audit it.
All right, well, more broadly, Hillary Clinton's worried about the influence of the Chinese government attempting to exert on Australian politics and policy. We know she's been in town. Let's take a listen to more of what she said.
If you think there's a hidden hand somewhere that is buying off politicians or otherwise exercising influence, then that begins to really tear at the fabric of a democratic society.
So, Clive, to you, and Clinton is saying China is attempting to meddle in Australia the way that Russia meddled in US politics. It's pretty strong language, is she right?
Well, I've just spent a week in Washington where there's very strong interest in what's happening in Australia. They're really quite alarmed about what's happening in Australia, from Congress to the State Department to the intelligence agencies. They're quite concerned that China has launched a very systematic campaign to shift opinion, particularly elite opinion in Australia, so that we move away from the US alliance and adopt a more independent foreign policy. In other words, one more sympathetic towards China's claims. And that's what Hillary Clinton was referring to.
OK, Ben, obviously China is going to be a major trading partner for us moving forward. How important is it for the government to get the balance right between the two conflicting priorities?
First of all, I think we shouldn't become part of weapon between China and the US fight. And I totally understand why Clinton said that. But what we need to understand is, China represents 30% of our export market. And we shouldn't, as Australian government, we shouldn't be influenced by any foreign power, that including the United States. And China, and we need to make a decision that make most out of Australians.
Yeah, very true.
All right. Benjamin Sun, Clive Hamilton, we thank you for your time.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.